Or Christmas maze or something. Ask the people who created these books.
All right, so your bell work is actually a paper and I'm about to pass out. Starting with the bell work. Okay, I will check it once you have it attached in your journal. Notice it says tape it to your journal and then raise your hand. You're going to have the cards are going to go in a line, so make sure you draw a line for these, not just dots. Okay? So when people turn something off, Where's your starting point? So this right here is not included. The store to be stopped and just come in. Okay, or you can just go into the shortcut and move that. Okay. It makes sense how it feels. It's out. Nope, this way you can probably look at how many paper is sticking out. What do you do? Okay. That's not what you do. You need to put four. You need to put four, you need to put. So, you got one like this. I had one that I had a stop sign here. It's not here. You do have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 over here. Okay. So it's not necessarily just the blocks. It's the all in place. Okay. Well, whatever more you want, so that way, you know how it is, right? Okay, so if you go on this one you need 3 blocks. And on this one you need 3 blocks. And you did 1, 2, 3, 4, but you have to count. 1, 2, 3, and here. Looks like you started to do it, you just didn't time it. Okay, so after you finish the class for the day, it does tell you that you're going to do some vocabulary. Once you finish the vocabulary, let me know and I will check that.
I'm putting my phone on if I haven't already. I think I have to. Yeah, I've already put it on silent.
Did you finish your vocabulary? Yeah. You got vocabulary up there. After your bell work, in your journal, I want you to do some vocabulary. finished the vocabulary and I have checked it. Okay, so this should be here. The vocabulary should not be right here. That way you have enough pages. That way you have enough pages for the entire semester, okay? Okay, if I have checked your vocabulary, you can go down to January 26th on that Google Classroom post, and you can do the forces in motion activity there. So 126, it's one of those pet activities. So I have 7 people that are working on the vocabulary. Take another couple minutes and then we'll move on. All right, so if I do not have your vocabulary yet, you need to finish that for homework and make sure I see it tomorrow. We are going to go ahead and move on. For this next part, you won't need your Chromebooks. You can go ahead and close those. All right, so looking at your examples, for your vocabulary, your balanced and unbalanced forces. I think you've got a pretty good idea in understanding the words. We need to tweak it a little bit though, because the majority of what I've been seeing is the idea of one person pulling against another, like playing tug of war or tugging against your dog, or two people challenging each other. And yes, that is balanced or unbalanced forces, but there is so much more. Okay. Last week we did our benchmark test, so you didn't see me on Wednesday or Thursday, but I did see class periods 5, 6, and 7. They actually worked through an activity that talked about different types of forces. So I'm going to kind of review some of that with you guys so you can identify some different forces that are happening. Okay, first off, the most common one would be applied force. Okay, thinking about that word, do any of you have a guess as to what this might mean? John, what do you think?
You're putting force to it?
Good, well put, putting it to it, okay? So, a force is applied to an object or a person by another object. So, basically a force is put onto an object or another person. When your sibling comes up and shoves you, that's an applied force, okay? When you are typing on your Chromebook, that's an applied force because you're putting the force on the keys. This is probably one of the most common forces because we're constantly putting force onto different things. When you're writing with your pencil, you've got lots of applied forces. Applied force to go this way, applied force to go this way. All right, that's constant different applications of force. Okay, this is kind of a weird one. If they had asked me, I would not have named this normal force. I would have named it support force, but no one asked me, so they called it normal. Basically, normal force is the idea that there are things around us all the time that support the weight of other things. Your table is supporting the weight of your Chromebooks, your journals. Some of you, because you got your elbows on your table. It's supporting you and the weight that is put onto the table. Okay, that is considered a normal force. The force exerted upon an object that is in contact with another stable object. Okay, same idea. When I lean on my file cabinet like this, is it supporting my weight? Yeah, it's not letting me fall all the way through. So the file cabinet is supporting me, therefore it's a normal force. The walls of buildings are a normal force because they support the weight of each floor, right? So think of normal force as like a support force. It's there, it's holding things steady and stable, okay? Next is tension force. You know what that word might mean. What do you think of that? What do you think tension force is? Jason, what do you think?
Like how like a rubber band is stretched really far and it has a lot of like rubber, like that's when you just break it together.
Okay, I especially like the hand motion you did. He did the hand motion like this and went like this, okay? That is the idea of tension force. It's a force from opposite ends, pulling tight, something like a string, a rope, a cable, or a wire, okay? So when you've got things pulled in opposite directions, hey, Summer, we don't need the Chromebooks right now, okay? When you have a clothesline, it's stretched from opposite directions. If it weren't stretched, it wouldn't be much of a clothesline because as soon as you put something on there, it would dip down to the bottom, right? Let's see, there's a whole bunch of these. That's the only one I could think of at this. When you have a tow truck is pulling a car up to the actual tow truck park, usually uses a chain. That chain is a tension force to drag the car up. On a boat, okay, when you dock, you tend to put a rope on the dock that's also attached to the boat. That's a tension force. It's being pulled from opposite directions.
Tightrope?
Yes, exactly. Okay. All right. This one should already be pretty easy. What do you think this is? Elise?
I had something now.
John, what do you think?
Something that's like pushing against, like something that's bouncing on it. Like
Okay.
and it's pushing it back up.
That is part of it. A lot of you like to take apart your pens and your pencils, and they have little springs inside, and you squish them down. until they get curved so much they spring out of your hands, right? Okay, that's one version of it. You have a spring that can be compressed and it wants to go back to its original shape, so it springs back out again. There's another version though that's a little bit opposite. Yes, some springs are automatically have that shape going out, but do they all? Elise? Yeah, think about a slinky. You take the slinky, it's naturally all compressed. So with the slinky, when you stretch it out and then let go, what's it going to do?
It's gonna shoot back in.
Exactly. So springs can work in one of two ways. It's when the spring can be compressed or stretched. Okay? Either one. Basically, the idea is that it wants to go back to its natural shape. Okay? It's kind of related to the idea of elastic force. With elastic force, it's the same concept. It wants to go back to its original shape. If I stretch a rubber band and then let go, the rubber band wants to go back to its original shape, which is why it flies off. Okay? Same thing with springs. They want to go back to their original shape. I wasn't actually going to do that to you. Okay, friction force. You got this, I think y'all can get it. Get your brains awake. I only have a couple people thinking through here. I have about 3 of y'all who are actually awake. Get your brains going. Friction force. I know you've heard this word in science class before. Aaron, did I see that hand?
No.
Jason, what's friction force?
Where a force is being applied to an air force, so make it slow down or like make it go faster than ice and the thick grass.
Okay. How would you word it, John?
I forgot.
Elise, how would you word it? Jason gave some great examples. You come up with it, but when I put you on the pressure, when you're under pressure, you seem to forget. Aaron, what would you say?
Two forces rubbing against each other.
There you go. It's the idea that it can be forces, but also surfaces. Okay, when you have the surfaces rubbing against each other or moving across each other, that's when you've got friction. Okay, the surface of a tire is rubbing against the surface of the street, so we have friction. The surface of your hands rub against each other, so we get friction.
What about a boat on the water?
That could be friction too, and we'll kind of discuss that in the next one. Okay. Basically, any two surfaces that are rubbing against each other is going to cause friction, some more than others. Like Jason mentioned the idea of against ice. If you have a surface going against ice, there is friction, there's just not a lot. Versus if you're going against grass, it's got a lot more friction. If you're going across grass with cleats, that's a whole lot more surface, so it creates a whole lot more friction. Okay? Yeah.
What about an airplane in the air?
That's so interesting. Look at what the next one is. It's like you're reading my mind. So, John, how about an airplane going in the air?
It's gonna go through the air, so it's touching the air and the clouds. It flies fast.
Right. It depends. Remember, there are molecules in the air, and every one of those molecules still have a surface. It's a small surface, but it still has a surface. So air resistance is actually friction, but it's the friction based on the molecules in the air. Okay, so you had it exactly. Okay, that this is friction, but it's friction from all of the little molecules that are in the air. Okay, this is why parachutes work. We want them to work because we want those molecules to get caught and slow you down, right?
So
Yeah, I think I had a question, was it last week asking? I think there was only fifth, sixth, and seventh. One of their questions that they had last week, I had them watch something about jumping out of an airplane with a parachute. And I asked them, is this something you'd want to do?
No.
Okay. You'd have to really rely on this air resistance force if you were willing to do that. Okay. Elise.
What if your parachute doesn't work?
Then the air resistance didn't work, right? Okay. Okay. But
walking.
think about when you're making a paper airplane. The paper airplanes that work the best cut through the air the best and eliminate more of that air resistance. Okay. All right, so next one, this should be an easy one.
Oh, that's easy.
Okay, Cintley.
The force that keeps things on the ground from floating away.
Exactly. Now, this does have a little bit more of a technical side to it, and we are going to get into the technical part of this as we go along. But it's, as Cintley says, basically the force is pulling us down. The force with which one large object attracts another object toward itself. Basically, anything that has mass has gravity. Do you have mass? You have gravity.
We armor.
Yeah. However, which has more mass, you or the Earth? The Earth has way more mass. So basically, it's canceling out whatever gravity we may have. Okay? The larger something is, the more gravity it will have, which is why the Earth goes around the sun, because the sun has a lot more mass, therefore it has a lot more gravity. But it's the same idea as to why the moon orbits the Earth. The moon has more gravity. I'm sorry, I need more coffee. The Earth has more gravity than the moon, so it's the moon that goes around the Earth. Okay, Elise?
This pencil has not that much mass, so
Okay, it does have gravity, but compared to everything else around it, it doesn't have enough mass to actually affect the other things around it. John?
Doesn't the sun orbit something too?
The sun will actually orbit the galaxy.
Oh, it
So-
it takes like 221 billion years.
I think- Is it million or billion? Well, look, we're gonna look at that as we go along when we start our solar system unit. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same idea. The center of the galaxy has a great deal more gravity than even the sun, and so yes, the sun does orbit that. Yes.
okay, this is like about gravity, but like when we learn about waves,
Not in this class.
I know, but when?
Honestly, I don't know. That's probably more along the lines of the early years when you're learning as to whether things sink or float. We're now getting a little bit more advanced where we figure out why they sink or float based on density.
I just want to know.
Okay, so now looking at the idea of these forces. Before we started this, I told you that a lot of my responses for your vocabulary were the idea of tug of war or competing against something that has more or less mass. But that's not all of it. Okay, in this picture, we have a mountain that is having a landslide. We have forces acting here. Okay, we have the force of gravity that was triggered, and all that gravity is pulling the rocks and the gravel down. Before this started, though, there was a normal force holding all of these rocks up. Before this was actually triggered, all of these forces were balanced. The normal force of the mountain and the gravity force on those rocks were balanced so that they were still. Something happened, though, to trigger the rocks, and the force of gravity became unbalanced. If you remember last week with our notes, we saw that balanced and unbalanced forces will have arrows to show which one has more force than the other. So our arrows here are definitely showing that the gravity has a greater force than the normal force that would just support it and keep it up. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at with these next pictures, is which force is greater? What forces do we have, and which ones would be greater? Is it a balanced or unbalanced force? Okay, so look at this next one. We got a zip line going. Think about what kind of force do we have going on here? Elise?
Gravity.
That is going to be part of it, absolutely. Gravity's going to kind of make it make it more fun. Aaron? You would have air resistance, okay?
Friction.
It's not going to be one of your major ones. Cameron?
She said it.
Friction.
There is friction. That's true. Friction will kind of slow it down so it doesn't go too fast, but there's another major one. Did you have your hand raised? Okay. Madison? There's not as much the normal force. I mean, yes, it is supporting you, but only to a limit. There's some when you jump off, but that's not a big one.
Balance?
What we're looking at are all these forces going to be balanced or unbalanced. Think about the idea of the zip line itself. Lily? That's only at the beginning or the end when I'm probably at the end when it stops you. But that's not the main one. There's a really big important one here. Tension force. Okay? To even be a zip line, we have to have the tension force holding it from opposite directions. Okay? You've got it secured to the top of this, and then way down the line, it's secured somewhere else. And it's got to have that opposite force to keep it nice and tight. So the two big ones are the tension force, but also, you already mentioned this, if the line was completely horizontal, would that be a fun zip line? No, they push you out, and then you just kind of be dangling there about where they are right there. And that's it. Okay, the other part that makes it fun is the one, I think John mentioned it, the gravity force. Okay, they intentionally tie those off so that they're at an angle. Because once you're going on the tension part of it, the gravity is what pulls you along. And that's what actually makes it more fun. Now, yes, as you're being pulled along, I think that Cameron and Jacob mentioned the friction one, where it's attached right up here at the top. There's definitely friction, and that amount of friction will make you go fast, but not too fast. Okay, you want that happy medium. And then as you're going through the air, you definitely feel the wind. That is your air resistance. And then at the very end, you're able to stop because there is typically a spring down there. Elise?
What if it snaps?
We're not going to play the what if game. Now, again, the big one is the tension force that actually makes this work. But you would have another force for the air resistance. Which do you think would be greater in this case right here? Gravity or air resistance?
Gravity. Air resistance.
Which one's going to be greater?
Oh, the air resistance.
Okay, so when you're going through the air, is it pushing you back up?
Gravity.
Gravity is actually a little bit stronger. As long as you keep going down the line, gravity is stronger. Now, if you go on a really super windy day and it's pulling you back up the wrong direction, in that case, air resistance would be greater. But I don't think they let you go on the zip line at that point anyway. Okay. I've never been on one, but I'm assuming that they try to be a little bit more safe. Okay, so what kind of forces do we have going on here? Remember? Yes, definitely an applied force. Okay. He has to apply a great deal of force here to get the ball to go where he wants it to go. What else, Jason?
Friction.
Why?
Because it gets into the grass and trying to get the ball up off the grass.
Good. There is friction force here. Notice his foot is planted. Those are not just regular tennis shoes, they're cleats because they add more surface area. The more surface area in the grass, the better friction he has. But also the cleats are working on the friction between the shoe and the ball. And that's going to force the ball further along. Okay? John, what else?
Gravity.
Why?
Because the ball's falling down and it's pulling the ball down.
Okay. And that's something every sport has to deal with. No matter what sport you've got, if there's something going through the air that you're trying to get to a certain location, you're going to have to deal with gravity. Okay? Because it's always going to pull the thing to the ground. What else, Jacob? Why? Yeah, but we got to understand what is it that's providing that normal force. I think you're singing over there, Cameron. Okay. If the ball was on the ground and just resting there, then the earth would be providing the normal force. But right now it's actually up in the air, so it doesn't have that normal force there. You could say that the ground is supporting, is giving normal force to his foot, which is planted. You could say that. Okay. What else? Think about when the ball is actually in the air. Aaron? Air resistance. That's the other part just about every sport has to deal with. Okay. You've got the ball that goes in the air. No matter how hard he kicks it, that ball is not going to stay in the air. Okay. He kicks the ball is automatically fighting the air resistance. And the air resistance is slowing it down. As the ball goes slower and slower, eventually gravity takes over and it now has a greater force, and so the ball starts coming down. Just about every sport has to deal with that kind of thing. Football. is designed specifically with the points on the ends to try to counteract the air resistance, but it's still going to have the same issue. At some point, the air resistance is going to slow it down enough so that gravity takes over. Okay. If you're swimming, it's not necessarily air resistance at that point. It's like more like water resistance, but it's still the same idea. Okay. You've got to, all these sports have to deal with these different types of forces and figure out, are we going to overcome them, and what do we need to do to overcome them so we can get it further along where the direction we want it to go. Okay. There is another one acting on him. What do you notice, Aaron? What do you think, John?
Tension?
Not tension on this one. Madison? Yeah, think about it. Look at his position. Gravity is still going to be working against him. So if he stays in that position, what's going to happen to him?
He's just gonna fall down.
He's going to fall.
Unless you like
Okay. Now, he is an athlete. He's more of an elite athlete. He's got the muscle twitch so he can go pretty quickly. Most likely, as soon as he kicks the ball, he can move fast enough to catch himself before he really falls. But he still has to keep in mind gravity is trying to pull him down. Okay. So he has to be able to react as soon as he kicks the ball to catch himself. Okay. Same idea as in basketball. When you jump up to get the ball in the hoop, you know you have to deal with gravity. So if you don't adjust for gravity, you're not going to fall right. Okay. All right. What about this one?
oh, that's easy.
You say it, but I only have a certain number of people participating. I've got like a big group of the classes just here. I don't know that your minds are actually engaged. Focus. Judith. Yes, friction here. You have to have friction between the tip of the match and the sandpaper that's on the edge of the box. But that's actually not the greatest force here. There's another bigger one we have to focus on. We have to make sure we do correctly. Haley? Applied force. If I took that match and just barely dragged it along the sandpaper, would it do anything? No. You actually have to give a certain amount of applied force going down and then do the friction. If you have too much, it breaks the match. If you don't have enough, it won't actually ignite. You have to push down a certain amount and then drag it across to get the right amount of friction to actually get it to ignite. Okay? All right, what about this one?
What is that? Oh, it's a book. I thought it was like glass.
Gravity.
Oh, what did you say?
Gravity.
Okay, definitely gravity holding these things down. At least, what else?
Normal.
Normal force, because they are on the table. Okay, and what you'll notice is that the force of the normal force of the table and the force of gravity are equal. Okay, notice the arrows are exactly the same. I know because I copy and pasted, copy, pasted, copy, pasted. Okay, they're all the same, which means it's balanced, so we don't have a change of motion here. Okay, John.
Friction, because the books are rubbing against the table and the glasses in the cup or that.
That is a good point. You have to have a certain amount of friction for it to actually stay still. If your Chromebooks did not have friction against the table, they'd slide right off, even though you just set them down there. Okay, but they do have friction. So instead of sliding off, they will stay there because gravity and the table are supporting them both. That is true. All right, we've got an old chair that needs to be upholstered. What kind of force are we dealing with here? Kelly? Okay, so these springs naturally want to be in this up position. Okay, Aaron, why?
Because you have to push them down.
Okay, and it's kind of it could be gravity, it could be something else. Madison?
Applied force.
Okay, it could be like a combination of applied and gravity, because when I come over to my chair, I have to intentionally apply myself to the chair, right? But then once I've applied there, then gravity is going to hold me down. So it's kind of a combination of both. The way these things work, and of course we definitely want it covered first. We don't want to sit on it just like this. But when it has the cover on it, you sit down on it and gravity's holding you down, but the springs have enough force to keep you up off of the surface down there, because that would not be comfortable to sit on the surface. So these springs are actually pretty strong that they can apply that force that's going up. If you've ever been in one of these older chairs, you can actually kind of feel the springs and bounce up and down. And then you probably get yelled at because you're bouncing up and down in an antique chair. Okay. Yeah, I do that to my kids. Jason,
A normal force,
why?
because you gotta keep the springs up, like from breaking through, I guess.
Okay. And more specifically, they are normal because this stuff down at the bottom that's crisscrossed is called webbing. And that webbing is actually supporting the springs. So yes, that is normal force there. We also have the normal force from the legs. John?
Friction, because it's the cushion is rubbing against the springs, and like whenever you push down, it kind of like flips all over.
Which is probably why it has to be recovered at this point, right? He's right. I mean, as you continue using a chair, all that friction that you've got in using the chair wears it down. So it does have to get to this point where it has to be reupholstered. Okay. All right. I think we have one more.
Well, let me see.
Madison, what do you think?
Friction,
Okay. Why?
because, if you're riding a bike, if you're riding it on something that has no friction, like ice, you just slide and you won't really, the wheel won't really turn.
Okay. So more specifically, the wheels. Okay. The surface of the wheels are going to have friction with the surface that you're riding on. In a sport like this, the thinner the wheels, the less friction, the faster you'll go. If you are riding a race that would be like this, you don't want to ride a mountain bike because those tires are thick. That provides more friction, and you want the least amount of friction as possible. What else, Summer? I mean, Mira?
Applied force because you're selling the pedals.
There you go. He has to use that applied force with his feet to get the bike to go. Elise?
No,
Why?
because it's the bike is supporting his weight.
That is true. And you can see he's actually leaning on the handlebars. So that would be a supportive normal force. River? There you go. Air resistance. He's not wearing that getup because it's fashionable. Okay. The helmet looks weird, but it's like that because it cuts down on the air resistance. Okay. When you're pedaling like this, you want to be able to get through that wind as easy as possible. So the helmet is shaped that way because basically it goes through the air much smoother. The air goes around it instead of you trying to go through it with like a flat helmet. If you're going through it with a flat helmet, that's going to make it a lot more difficult.
Because it's
Okay.
the air's pushing it, it's making it slower.
Exactly. Same thing with his clothes. The design and the fabric of the clothes are specifically that way to allow you to get through the air much easier. Aaron, why?
Because he has to stay on the bike.
There you go. We hope that he can stay upright, but they do sometimes fall. Not a good thing, but it happens.
And that's balance force, because he's balancing on the bike, so he doesn't fall.
Okay, but
When he moves, it's unbalanced.
balance itself is not a force. Balance is a state of the force. Okay, so we had states of matter, we had states of energy, potential or kinetic. This is now a state of forces, balanced or unbalanced. Okay, so all of these forces work together, and we hope that he's now balanced. Does that make sense? Okay, Jason.
And then how much made that for like aerodynamics?
Yes, that word aerodynamics is because of this kind of thing right here. Okay, so this is actually perfect timing. I'm going to stop this because I want us to be able to move into what we're actually going to be doing this week. Wait, hey, you take Pandora and get rid of it because we actually need to hear something.